So, my name's Kurt Steinke. We're going to talk a little bit about what one of my graduate students is working on here. Seth Purucker is my second-year master's student. Deals a lot with management on winter wheat. So a lot of questions swirling around the puzzle we call management. What should we do? What should we not do? One thing I always like to emphasize is that we've really looked at the last couple of years is start right to finish well, right? That applies to wheat, corn, soybean, beet, potato, dry beans, everything. Start right to finish well. And we know starting right to finish well is different year to year, right? Let's look at 2019 versus 2018, okay? The pain that we have in 2019. Look at this upcoming weekend last year, Father's Day weekend, we were about 96 degrees, and what we're standing on was dry as a bone. It was like chalk. It was like dust, right? What a difference a year makes. So, again, can't look at that cookbook mentality when you look at trying to get that plant out of the ground or growing well, each in the same way, each and every year. Big differences. 2019, let's look at growing degree days. We're far below what we've been the last couple of years. Let's look at fall planting date. All right, a lot of us got planted in, or got our wheat in a little later last year compared to the 2018 field season. Less growth, less development, and obviously the faucet hasn't shut off thus far in 2019. A lot more moisture, okay, to impact our management. So, what can we do to promote that plant in the fall to skyrocket or to really push it out of the ground come green up time in spring? We know planting date has a huge impact, right? We know if we can plant third and a half, fourth week in September, we know the benefits that that planting date can do. However, not everyone here follows dry beans. Not everyone here follows corn silage. Not everyone here has a low maturity group soybean, right? So planting date can only go so far. So what can we do in the fall to really promote that tiller growth and development and that plant growth and development overall? And does that planting date influence that nutrient response that we get? That's what Seth's going to talk about a little bit. One point that I really want to emphasize is from a nutrient perspective, it's not all about nitrogen individually. We tend to get caught up in N, and may not just be about N applications in the fall. So Seth's going to go over 3 main points that I want everyone to focus on and implications, those 3 take-home points to walk away from here today. So I'll hand it over to Seth Purucker. He's my second-year master's student, very sharp on wheat production, and his project deals specifically with winter wheat growth and development. Seth.
So can you guys hear me okay?
Feel free to move in a little bit.
He's not gonna Can you guys hear me on the trailer? Can? Okay. So like Kurt said, my name is Seth Purucker. I'm a second-year master's student under Dr. Kurt Steinke, and I'll be talking about some of my master's research, which is evaluating 6 different inputs under traditional and enhanced management. What those 6 inputs are seeding rate, fungicide, plant growth regulator, autumn starter fertilizer, weekly N applications or spoon feeding or nitrogen, and a high N rate. So what those rates are, seeding rate, we have 0.9 and 1.8 million seeds per acre. Fungicide was applied as Prosaro at 8.2 ounces per acre, and that was at flowering. So actually we applied fungicide yesterday morning. PGR was applied as Palisade at 12 ounces per acre, and that was at Feek 6 or first node above the ground. Autumn starter fertilizer was applied at a rate of 250 pounds per acre as a granular autumn top dress with an analysis of 12, 40, 0, 10 sulfur, and 1 zinc. Of that 10% sulfur, half of it was sulfate and the other half elemental sulfur. Weekly N applications were applied every 7 to 10 days, starting at green up and applied up to 49 days after green up, using 28%, so that totaled 8 applications. And our high N rate was a 33% increase over our base N rate. Our base N rate was 100 pounds of N per acre, therefore making our high N rate 133 pounds of N per acre. So I said weekly N application, but we have UAN 28% SPN, so that's what that means. That means weekly N applications. So this trial was set up as a randomized complete block design with 4 replications and 15 treatments, 14 of those treatments being input combinations and 1 untreated check. So what a randomized complete block design is we have each treatment within each rep, and we have 4 reps. So we have 3 tiers of 5 to make 15. It's our first rep, then the next 3 tiers are our second rep, then our third rep, and then our 4th rep. Soil test values for this field were 7.1 pH, 33 parts per million phos, 102 parts per million potassium, 8 parts per million sulfur, and 3.4 parts per million zinc, with a CEC of 12 and 2.8% organic matter. And this wheat was planted on October 19th, following soybeans and conventionally tilled soils using variety starburst. So this trial utilizes an Omission trial design. So what an Omission trial design is we have our enhanced management, which is all of our inputs at 0.9 million seeds per acre. Then we individually remove each input and only compare it to the plot that had all of our inputs. Next, we have traditional management, which is no inputs, only a base N rate, and that's at 1.8 million seeds per acre. Each input is then added individually and only compared to the plot that had no inputs, only a base N rate. And then last, we have our untreated check, and that check was at 1.8 million seeds per acre. So I'll start off talking about our seeding rate component. So if you guys want to come down here a little bit, I know we got the camera, but so last year our wheat was planted on September 20th, and this year October 19th. So here's our plot, our enhanced management, all of our inputs at 0.9 million seeds per acre. Plot to the right of it here is our enhanced management without our low seeding rate. So that makes it our enhanced at 1.8 million seeds per acre. And last year, we saw no yield difference between these 2 seeding rates. What we found is the 0.9 million seeds per acre tillered twice as much as the 1.8 million seeds per acre. We saw just as many heads per square foot, just as many heads in the plot, and so we didn't see a yield difference between the 2. Well, now let's talk about seeding rate under traditional management. So last year, when we had traditional management, which is no inputs and 100 pounds of N, we found 16 bushel decrease at 0.9 million seeds per acre compared to traditional management at 1.8 million seeds per acre. So under enhanced management, we saw no yield difference between the 2 seeding rates, but under traditional management, we did. So why? Well, under our enhanced management, at the lower seeding rate, each plant was able to fully utilize each input in a multiple input system to produce a comparable grain yield to the 1.8 million seeds per acre. So, but traditional management, we did not have any additional inputs that may promote additional tillering, right? And we had dry conditions during grain fill. So, each plant at the lower seeding rate wasn't able to spend enough energy on each head to fill it as much as the 1.8, and that's why we saw that 16 bushel decrease. So next, and that, like I said, this plant or wheat was planted on October 19th, and last year it was planted on September 20th. So it'll be interesting to see if our enhanced management at the lower seeding rate yields the same as our higher seeding rate with that later planting date. So next, I'll come down here a little bit. We'll talk about our fungicide component. So this is our enhanced management without fungicide. All of our inputs except fungicide at 0.9 million seeds per acre. And we'll compare it to this plot that received all of our inputs. Last year when we removed fungicide under enhanced management, we saw a 12 bushel decrease. And last year on campus, we saw a lot of disease pressure, a lot of head blight. We have our higher N rate of 133 pounds. We have fall N. And so we saw a lot more head blight when we removed fungicide. And that led to that 12 bushel decrease. When we added fungicide to traditional management, again at 1.8 million seeds per acre, we did not see a yield benefit. And that was, again, compared to the plot with no inputs. However, where we found a benefit was our down levels. When we had traditional management no fungicide, our DON levels were 3 or 4 parts per million. And when we threw a fungicide in, our DON levels went down to 1 or 1.5 parts per million. Under enhanced, when we had our enhanced without fungicide, our DON levels were 4, sometimes upwards of 5 parts per million, so pretty high, right? We have the higher end rate. So when we had the fungicide in enhanced management, we dropped our DON levels back down to that 1, 1.5 parts per million. So I have some handouts here to have you guys pass around. On the left of these handouts is our enhanced management, and on the right is our traditional management, with and without autumn starter. And I'll talk about that as I talk about our next component of autumn starter. Pass it around, please. Thank you. So last year, when we removed autumn starter from enhanced management, so again at 0.9 million seeds per acre, we found a 14 bushel decrease compared to our plot right here, the kitchen sink plot, right? Even this year, at our later planting date, you can go along and see what has autumn starter, go in front of that plot, and you can almost see the person's feet standing behind you. That's the lack of plant growth that plot has compared to these ones. Last year, when we added autumn starter to traditional management, and that was at 1.8 million seeds per acre, we found a 10 bushel decrease, again under traditional management. So we saw the same thing, that autumn starter promoted plant growth and development, which led to those increase in grain yields. So let's talk about that plant growth for a second. You'll notice that on these sheets, when we have autumn starter present, our flag leaf is much, much bigger compared to when we don't. And we know that flag leaf drives yield, right? So it may be one of the components that help those increases in yield where autumn starter was present. So let's talk about tillering for a second. When we added autumn starter to traditional management last year, again that wheat was planted on September 20th, we found an increase of 71 tillers per square foot compared to traditional management with no inputs. So that's a pretty big increase, right? Well, this year, or this season, when our wheat was planted on October 19th, we found an increase of only 22 tillers per square foot when autumn starter was added to traditional management. So that's a pretty big difference, right? 71 compared to 22. And we start thinking about, well, why is such the big difference across 2 years? But remember our planting date, right? So at our earlier planting date, our autumn starter was able to be utilized more with a bigger plants that had a bigger root structure, maybe soil temps weren't as cold, at that September planting. So that autumn starter was utilized more compared to this year when we had a later planting and our plants were much smaller and our root structure wasn't as big. So it kind of contradicts the idea of, the later planting, the more fertilizer we need to help it catch up, but we got to think about soil temps, plant size, and the root development of our wheat in the fall. So now let's talk about what in that autumn starter caused that increase in tillering, caused that increase to plant growth, right? So remember our analysis was 12, 40, 0, 10 sulfur, and 1 zinc. Half of that sulfur was sulfate, and the other half elemental sulfur. So, like I said before, soil test values for this field were 33 parts per million phos, 8 sulfur, and 3.4 zinc. Last year, our soil test values were 12 parts per million phos, 8 sulfur, and 5.4 zinc. So, last year we were phosphorus deficient, and this year we were phosphorus sufficient, because the critical level is 25 for wheat for phosphorus. However, a blanket application of phosphorus was made to all plots to account for that lower phosphorus, so we can likely eliminate a phosphorus response. Now next, let's look at zinc. Well, MSU's E2904 bulletin defines wheat as being non-responsive to zinc applications in Michigan, so we can likely eliminate zinc. That leaves us with nitrogen and sulfur. Remember, we received 30 pounds nitrogen and 25 pounds sulfur in the fall, half of that sulfur sulfate and the other half elemental sulfur. So we're likely attributing that increase in tillering and plant growth to that nitrogen and sulfate available in the fall and that elemental sulfur oxidizing for continuous spring sulfur uptake. Now, the purpose of this project wasn't to say exactly what in the autumn starter caused that increase in yield, right? We're looking at autumn starter as a whole. So what we can do from here is kind of dig deeper into that autumn management to build a more resilient wheat plant. We can look at our planting dates, look at our soil test values. If we have high phosphorus level, are we going to necessarily see a phosphorus response? So that's one thing that we can take and run from here. It'll be interesting to see this year with the later planting date what we yield. So we still found an increase in tillering, but is plant response going to translate to yield response? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. So that's one thing we're hoping to see this year with that later planting date. So let's talk about enhanced management versus traditional management. We all know that products cost stuff. It costs to apply, right? So plot here is our enhanced management, all of our inputs at the lower seeding rate. And we'll compare it to our plot, it's the third one in, is our traditional management, which is no inputs, only a base end rate of 100 pounds at 1.8 million seeds per acre. This plot right here yielded 104 bushels per acre. That's pretty good. I mean, it sounds like it might be profitable to me. Traditional management back there yielded 87 bushels per acre. So right away, well, I think this might be more profitable because it yielded more. But we took into account the cost of the product and the cost of application of these products. These weekly end applications can get quite expensive when we're paying to apply nitrogen every single week, right? So we actually doubled our profitability under, I should say, expected profitability under traditional management compared to enhanced management. And how we calculated our expected profitability was our bushels times dollars per bushel minus our product and application cost. Now that the price I'm given is going to be a lot different, than someone that buys 3 rail cars full of autumn starter or mez, right? So it's not necessary to say that traditional management always going to profit more than enhanced management. It's just to think about our, the cost of our products and the profitability standpoint when we're trying to yield higher wheat. Someone brought this up earlier. Autumn starter was applied as a fall top dress. So as after the wheat emerged, after we planted, we went back on with granular fertilizer on top of the wheat. Well, the question was, why didn't we just do it all PPI, work it in and plant over it? It'd be a lot easier, right? We don't have to go back on top of our wheat. Well, look at the fall we had. We actually had to replant this site. Our first planting was around September 20th, and we had to replant October 19th. So am I going to apply fertilizer when I get a bad stand? So that's why we did a fall top dress. We waited until we saw what our stand was, decided it was a good stand, and then went back on with our fertilizer. So does anybody have any questions so far? No questions? Feel free to walk along the plots. We can see on the third tier all the way to our right is our untreated wheat. So that's our complete check. Sometimes we see wheat and we think, that doesn't look too bad. But then we see what maybe it could look like, right? So if you guys want to walk around, just as long as you walk in the alleys, that's fine. And if anybody wants to stay after, ask a question, Kurt and I will be around for lunch. So thank you guys.